Yet again, we had Kenyan shares falling back in yesterday's session. And as I mentioned earlier, we've got this market now having retreated just over 3% from its 2012 peak of 4,157 points. What are you making of the pullback that's coming through?
Well, largely expected. We did expect that there was going to be a slowdown. We did expect a slight correction. It's still be above the 4,000 mark, which is a good thing. I was actually thinking that by now we would be seeing it, heading a bit faster, around the 3,950 or something like that. But I think at the end of the day, we have various factors that are working to our advantage. One is that in as much as we have seen quite a bit of profit taking, and we have seen fund managers right now, since they're closing their books, not participating on the market, we don't have much negative sentiment, and the political risk has not yet set in, which is what we would have expected if we were going to have elections in December. So I think that is working to our advantage. And we are also seeing a lot of foreign, especially from Europe, we are seeing a lot of funds coming in, and that has, in the last few weeks, in as much as fund managers have taken a backseat now, we've seen that hold the market up quite substantially in the last 2 or 3 weeks, which is a very good thing, increasing demand, and that was very good. So I believe that those have worked to our advantage and have kept the market relatively stable so far.
Of course, to bear in mind, as you say, is that we're seeing profit taking come through. I mentioned the kind of profit taking activity we're seeing play out in the banking sector. We saw it take effect on the share prices of KCB and Barclays Bank in yesterday's session, but Everready as well. That share price down in yesterday's session. It ranked as the biggest loser on the NSE, and this after it's had quite a strong run on the back of what was considered very positive results, Samuel.
Well, I think I'm not very keen on Everready. They've not done very well in the last few years. They did have some positive results, but I think that was purely speculative behavior on the counter. They haven't yet come up with the plan as to how they're going to counter the surge of imports in, foreign imports of batteries, especially from the East, and which is their core area. And at some point they did say that they were going to get into the cosmetics industry, which I don't think has really kicked off. They've seen quite a bit of turnover at the top, and I think that also hasn't worked for them very well. And that said, there was a bit of speculative behavior following the results. There's a lot of investors holding Everready who are hopeful that they can at least cash in, whenever it makes a bit of a surge, they can at least, cash in and recoup whatever losses they've made on that.
Well, you're not one of those investors, it seems, Samuel, that's very hopeful for its prospects moving forward. Let's focus on Kenya Airways, and if you're holding out any hope for that company, because we've seen the company announce that it suspended flights to Chad, and that due to low bookings. This where African routes contribute to about half of the carrier's revenues and are supposed to be serving as a lifeline to the passenger numbers that have we've seen been declining from Europe specifically. I mean, just how much of a red flag has this raised for you, Samuel?
Well, I think Kenya Airways has had its share of issues this year. And yesterday, I think there was some litigation that went against it in terms of the High Court said that they have to reinstate those workers who are retrenched, and I think that will also work against them. Suspending flights to Chad is probably just showing that some of the routes that Kenya Airways has gone into are not really paying off, and so they're having a rethink. But I do think that it's also a good thing when they act fast, because you don't want to have been trying to keep a route open for too long and end up making you huge losses before you make a decision to actually pull out or suspend your flights to that route. I think we did see that happen with Jetlink, especially since they had a foreign currency issue in South Sudan, and they've ended up grounding their fleet, which is actually terrible for an airline. in as much as business continuity is concerned. So I do think that Kenya Airways, they are our national carriers, so we are very proud about how they have done, but they have had their share of issues, and I think that we haven't seen the end of that, especially with all the litigation in court and all those retrenchments. And yeah, so basically the holiday season might give them a bit of a
Let's give them some credit where credit is due, though, Samuel, because as one route closes, a couple more seem to be opening up. We've seen the carrier sign a code-share agreement with China Eastern Airlines that will see it expand its presence in the country. And under the agreement, we've got KQ set to share on Eastern Airlines daily services between Bangkok and Shanghai as well. What impact do you see this having on the group strategy moving forward?
Well, I think we're heading east more and more, and that is a very definite direction to go. And I think that the fact that Kenya Airways is looking to the east is a very good thing. We're having a lot of increase in business from that end, and I agree with you. That is credit where it's due. I think that's the right direction to look. We are increasingly seeing a lot of traffic on the China routes and also the Asian routes, and I think that Kenya Airways is definitely going to see a lot of their revenues going forward, especially now that Europe has had quite a bit of a difficult financial period. I think the East is what will kick in and sort of support that. We are also seeing an influx of tourists from the East, and that is also another good thing for Kenya Airways, especially the fact that we haven't seen a lot of charter flights coming from that end, whereas from Europe and the US and that side, we usually see more of the tourism coming on charter flights, which doesn't really help Kenya Airways. And the East, they do get to bring in the tourists.
Samuel, in the meantime, we've had the capital markets regulator clearing Seckam to raise 5 billion shillings through a bond. What kind of prospects does this open up for that company?
Well, Seckam has a lot of prospects. They're doing a very huge real estate development in Uganda and in Runda, which is an upmarket area in Nairobi. And that is, I think, one of the major investments that we'll probably see the funds go into. But they're also going, regional. They've gone regional in their investment portfolio, and I think that Seckam has a very strong outlook in terms of their net present value of growth opportunities, in that they are looking at various different options. They're diversifying their portfolio. They have the quoted private equity, they have the private equity, and they have they also have the quoted equity, and that and also real estate. Sorry, and those three lines are really the way to go, I believe, because then in any case, when one is not really performing, for example, their quoted equity, then they can fall back on the other lines of business. We have seen them cut back on the quoted equity exposure, which has been really fluctuating in the last few years, which is a good thing, I think. And I believe that going forward in the next 1 or 2 years, we should see Seckam beginning to make some really good headway.